Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY sailboat refit video here about good old, Athena's inside of the tent. Last week I finished painting the hull with Perfection Pro and it looks absolutely amazing. When Jason was teaching me how to apply Perfection Pro, we used the transom as our little training area. That means the transom was the first place on the boat to get all three coats. But when I applied the third coat, the wind picked up, and that resulted in a less than super spiffy surface. Perfection Pro does not like wind, and seeing as I've already got Athena in this giant tent, I know that I can do better on the transom. Yesterday I sanded the surface silky smooth using 400 grit. I washed the hull to get rid of any dust. Today I'm just going to give everything a final wipe down, and then we can truly finish this paint job. For the transom, I'm not gonna need a lot of paint. One of these buckets filled roughly to here is enough for the entire hull. During the 10-minute induction time, I'm gonna apply some masking tape to the hull and then we can get started. Perfection Pro is incredibly easy to apply. All you want to make sure is that you don't have any dry spots and that you don't have any runs. There are a few things to keep in mind, like for instance the fact that Perfection Pro does not like wind. That will wreck your finish. And also, you can't really go back and fix mistakes. Say I noticed some kind of dry spot up here now. That would be borderline too late for me to go back and fix that. I would only make it worse. I love applying Perfection Pro. I mean, all the prep work for painting is horrible, but the application of Perfection Pro is really nice because you get to see a really spiffy result right away. I mean, look at that finish. It is amazing to me that that is just rolled on with a roller. There's no spraying, not even any tipping. I can't really do anything super dusty inside of the tent for the rest of the day because the Perfection Pro needs a chance to cure. But yesterday I used a little bottle jack to lift Athena and move the blocks of wood that was sitting under her keel. I had completely forgotten about this, but I still need to apply a copper coat under the keel in this little area and this little area. I've got a couple of other videos where I go over why I've chosen to go with copper coat and also the application process, so I'm not going to bore you with that in this video. My day job is as a software developer, and because of COVID I am working from home, or today from the workshop, and that means I can apply a coat of copper coat. That'll take 10 minutes maybe, then I can go do work for an hour and a half, then I can come back, do another coat of copper coat, and it'll just be like a tiny little coffee break. Yesterday I finished applying copper coat under the keel. This morning I noticed that the weather forecast called for some pretty high winds the next couple of days. Tomorrow it's supposed to be gusting up to 44 knots, and I don't think the tent is going to be able to withstand that, so I decided to remove the tarps. Having removed the tarp, I got my very first look at the third and final coat of paint on the hull, and I think it looks pretty dang spiffy. I think it looks even better than the second coat, although I'm not sure the difference is going to show up on camera. Now I can finally move the paint the hull task into the done column. I've received what I hope is going to be the last spare parts for Athena's D240, at least for now. But before I fit this molded hose, there is something else I want to take care of. A few weeks back, I got a very nice comment reminding me to check that the saildrive is electrically isolated from the engine. So let's do that real quick. The installation instructions tells you to measure between the grounding point on the engine and a bolt on the upper unit on the saildrive. And you should get a value above 100 kiloohms, which... I am definitely not the smartest guy in the world, but that is not 100 kiloohms. I've removed the control cable, and the good news is that helped. The bad news is it didn't help enough. I am still way below 100 kiloohms, so yeah, that's not good news. If the saildrive is not electrically insulated from the engine, I believe the saildrive through galvanic corrosion can be turned into a large but completely useless paperweight in a short amount of time. So this is something I definitely want to figure out. Before I start pulling the engine out of the engine compartment to separate it from the saildrive, I better just check with an expert because that's going to be a lot of work and I want to make sure that that's the right thing to do. By that, I mean I want to make absolutely sure that I've tested this in the right way. There's no urgency here and I can easily afford to wait just a single day to start pulling things apart. To be honest, I don't really see how I could mess up testing this, but it never hurts to talk to an expert, so I'll do that first thing tomorrow. It's the next day. I've talked to a local marine mechanic and the biggest Volvo Penta dealer here in Denmark, and their answers were, well, kind of surprising. I called the local guy first and he said he's never done that check to check the resistance between the sail drive and the engine when installing a sail drive in an engine. He's always just put the two together and assumed that everything was fine. He suggested that I call the biggest Volvo Penta dealer here in Denmark. I did. And their reply was essentially, you checked what? They don't do that check either. That's a little bit surprising. I know as well as anybody that documentation and the real world are not always the same, but I figured this instance was, well, pretty important. So now I'm in this wonderful situation where the instructions are telling me to do one thing and the professionals are telling me, why the heck are you doing that? I feel like this is something that's important at the very least to dig into a little bit further. And I do have a plan. This is an exploded diagram of the sail drive, and there are some plastic washers, number 50, 54, and 55, and there's also a plastic bushing. So the first step is just to check that they're there and that they look to be in good order. I've set up the GoPro here behind the sail drive, and here you can see those little plastic washers. There's one here, and there's another one down here. And it's the same on the other side. And looking at this one, it might be a little bit high. It could look like this is metal against metal. Look at the radius on this metal doohickey here. That's supposed to be over here. I don't know if this exposed corner here was enough to make contact with the sail drive, but let's check to see if this was the culprit. Well, this makes 0 sense. After having removed that bolt, I've now got less resistance between the sail drive and the engine. That's pretty odd. I've removed all 6 bolts that secure the sail drive to the engine, and all that's done is make an even better connection between the two. To the extent where we should probably replace the electric grid with just a long line of engines and sail drives. Let's see if I can ever so slightly pull the engine away from the sail drive. Well, this is kind of frustrating. I've got a little bit of a gap in there between them now, but I can't really make any kind of clearance because the engine wants to fall back this way and it's leaning up against the sail drive. There's an insulating plate between the sail drive and the engine, number 47. It's made out of the same material as these plastic washers. To get to that, I need to pull the engine out further than I can do by myself, so I'll need to enlist the help of some guy, and I'll see if I can get someone here next week. I'm going to hold off on installing the fuel filter and the raw water strainer until I figured out the little hiccup with the engine, but I can still go ahead and get some supports put in place for the raw water strainer that's going to go on this side. Volvo's instruction says to install the raw water strainer 10 to 20 centimeters above the water level. I believe the water level is somewhere right around here, which would make this a good spot for the raw water strainer. That would look like this. I think that could work. The expansion tank is a tiny bit cramped. It's not too bad. The alternative is to put the strainer over here, but that means the hoses would interfere with the fuel filter, so I think I prefer this side. Let's cut some little pieces of wood that I can epoxy in place and use to secure a piece of plywood that I can then in turn secure the strainer to. Just a little dab of thickened epoxy and this will be plenty strong. It looks a little bit horrible right now, but all of that is going to get covered up by a painted piece of plywood and it's all going to look really nice. Before I can put Athena back in the water, I definitely need some cleats to tie her up. So why don't we install those? I've got everything I need. I've got the cleats, I've got backing plates, I've got nuts and bolts. I've already drilled all of the holes I need in the deck, and those holes are of course completely sealed. In case I get any kind of a leak, I don't want water to get into the core in the sandwich construction. I'll start by modifying the bolts ever so slightly. A while back I got a very cool tip from one of you guys, and I've been dying to try it ever since. I'm going to be bedding these cleats with butyl tape, and ideally I don't want the bolt to rotate when I'm turning the knot, because that's going to squeeze out the butyl and could potentially cause a little leak. So I have cut a little slit or a little slot here in the bottom of the bolts. The problem is that there's only one of me here, and I can't reach the top of the bolt while turning the knot. So hence the little slot here in the bottom. That way I can use a screwdriver to secure the bolt while turning the knot. I'm almost out of butyl tape. I've only got a little bit left of the gray stuff I normally use. There's maybe enough here for a single cleat, but I've picked up some new butyl tape. The black one feels different than the gray one. The black one is way more sticky. Now the cement boat people have used the black one on their smaller boat for a few years, and they haven't had any problems with streaks or discoloring. So yeah, I'm gonna give the black one a try, and this will be very interesting. One little detail about the modified bolts here, I've lined up the slot here in the bottom so that it's parallel to the slot here on the top of the bolt. That way I can make sure these are oriented correctly. Of course, that is purely for cosmetic reasons. The black butyl also seems harder to tear. It's like it's tougher. This doesn't exactly look pretty. The black butyl tape is a little bit harder to apply because, like I said, it is very sticky. I have already done a dry fit here just to make sure that all of the holes line up, so we shouldn't have any issues. They're probably not going to be super easy to see on camera, but there are 4 bolts poking through the deck right here. So far, that little trick with using a screwdriver to secure the bolt while turning the knot works really, really well. It's definitely easier to have a second person help you, but this will do in a pinch. That's 1 cleat done, only 5 more to go. The 2 forward cleats are gonna involve me crawling into the chain locker, which I'm not super excited about, but let me pop these in and we can get started. This is gonna be hard to do in any kind of a graceful manner. Once you're in here, it's actually not that bad, but the opening is a little bit tight. And just like that, the 2 forward cleats are in. 1, 2, 3, and 4 out of 6 done. For the one over here, I've used the gray butyl tape just to be able to do a little bit of a comparison. The 2 aft cleats are also going to be a little bit of a challenge, but that is more because of all of my mess. Oh, dang it. And that's all of the cleats installed. I really like the look of these new cleats. I think they're going to serve us very well. And of course, it is a very important task that I can now check off of the to-do list. I was mulling over the idea of securing some kind of eye to the bottom of the cabin sole so that I could lift the back end of the engine to move it out of there, hopefully by myself. Martin suggested it might be a better option to simply just drill a hole in the cockpit sole. That way I could use the boom at some point in the future if I need to remove the engine to lift the back of the engine. So yeah, why don't we drill a hole in the cockpit sole? There's already this convenient lifting doodad here on the back of the engine, and if I could just pull up on this, then I could take the weight of the engine off of the sail drive, and it would be a lot easier to take all of this apart. So let's drill a hole somewhere up here. This might seem a little bit hasty, but I do think having a hole here to help support the weight of the engine will come in very useful. For instance, in 7 years when I need to replace the membrane around the sail drive again. The hole I've cut will fit a standard deck fill, so I can just pop in one of those, and then say in 7 years when I need to mess around with the engine, I'll undo the top of the deck fill, swoop a line down through there up through the boom, and voila, I can lift the back of the engine. Seeing as Athena doesn't have her mast step right now, I've used a couple of pieces of wood instead of her boom. And I've already connected the line to the engine, so let's see if I can lift it ever so slightly. I'm going to ever so slightly bring the engine forward, and then we'll see what happens back at the sail drive. Right in there, that white jacket looking thing, that is the insulator between the sail drive and the engine. But to be able to remove it, I need to pull the engine further forward. It definitely feels like a lot of the weight is off of the sail drive. So far, so good. I think I've got access to all of the pieces of the puzzle now. Here's that flappy barrier doodad. And down here is that plastic bushing. I am definitely not an expert, but I think these doodads here, all the plastic bits, is everything that's supposed to insulate the engine from the sail drive. So I'm gonna order all new plastic doohickeys. If one of you guys have experience with this stuff, I would love to hear from you. If I don't hear anything else, then all I'm gonna do is just to clean the two mating surfaces in there, replace all of the plastic doohickeys, and then just bolt everything back together again and cross my fingers. I know that the control cable was the initial culprit for the connection between the sail drive and the engine, but I know how to fix that, and provided the other issue goes away, that's going to be super easy to do next week. I believe that was caused by the control cable making contact to this metal top washer here. I think the rest of the control cable is electrically insulated from the engine by this rubber grommet doodad here. So if I just move the control cable to the inside hole, then that should solve that problem. Generally speaking, holes in a boat is something that's best to try to avoid. Having said that, I do think the cockpit sole hole is going to be my favorite hole aboard the boat. It's going to make it so much easier to do any kind of work on the engine. Now, of course, I'm going to have to leave the engine hanging there. So for now, I've just used a bit of plastic and covered up the hole to keep the rain out. So I'm going to have to leave the engine hanging for a little bit. But yeah, I'm thoroughly pleased with this progress. If the weather allows, then tomorrow we're going to move the entire tent structure to cover the cement boat instead of Athena. They still have a ton of fairing to do before they can paint their hull. And I don't really need the tent for Athena anymore. All I wanted to do was just to apply that last coat of paint. Seeing as that's done, well, the tent is available. Even though today is only Saturday, I'm gonna end this week's video today because I won't have a lot of time for shooting video tomorrow because of all of the tent moving. Next week, I am dropping off the old standing rigging to replace it. I don't exactly know when I'm gonna get the new standing rigging, but I don't imagine it should take more than a couple of weeks. Now that I've finished painting, my new priority 1 task is gonna be reconnecting the engine and getting that running again. My second priority task is going to be to service and rewire the mast. Provided the engine sail drive situation doesn't turn out to be a complete nightmare, I still think it looks very realistic that I'm going to be able to splash Athena sometime in October. And on that uplifting note, I'm going to end this week's video here. But before I do, I want to say a great big thank you to all of those of you who leave helpful comments. This week is a prime example of my bacon being saved by a comment. So yeah. Thank you so much. And that is going to be the end of this video. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!